Well, did you know that we have a freelance reporter in Caracas, Venezuela right now covering the people's uprising against the dictator, Nicolas Maduro? Her name is Annika Rothstein, and she's been doing videos from the heart of the city. Thankfully, she has a bodyguard and even a bulletproof vest with her, although it's a very dangerous place even in that circumstance. I encourage you to go and see all of Annika's videos at rebelvenezuela.com, and we're covering part of her travel and security costs. If you want to chip in for the crowdfunding, you can do that also at rebelvenezuela.com. Well, one of the things that's interesting to me is how the world has broken down on two sides of the Maduro-Chavez question. America, Brazil under Jair Bolsonaro, and most or many of the world's democracies have sided with the interim president, who, it is their view, is the democratic and constitutional president. His name is Juan Guaido. But countries like Russia, China, Cuba are siding with the tyrant, Maduro. And joining us now to talk about this is one of the leading experts on Turkey and Iran and other places like that. No surprise, he's with the Middle East Forum, and you know him as Dr. Daniel Pipes. He joins us now via Skype from Washington. Great to see you again, Dr. Pipes.
Great to see you, Ezra.
I think a lot of people are surprised to think that Venezuela, a country in Latin America, has such close ties to Iran and to Turkey. Can you explain? I mean, they seem like opposite countries to me, but they're connected. Tell us about that.
Well, if you're anti-American, that's the side to be on. Now, it's not surprising that Tehran is anti-American. It's been anti-American for 40 years, almost to the day, since the Ayatollah landed. But Turkey is, as you say, more surprising case. Turkey is a formal ally of the United States, Canada, and Western European countries. It is a member of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So we are formal allies. But in fact, under Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's been in power a bit over 15 years, they're on the other side. They have asked to join the Russian-Chinese equivalent of NATO, or sort of equivalent of NATO, called the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They have steadfastly, in virtually all their policies in recent years, or he, I should say, Erdogan, has steadfastly in all his policies over some years now, close to a decade, been always on the opposite sides from the Western democracies. So this is predictable on the one hand, but very strange on the other hand to be getting into bed with such a losing proposition as Nicolas Maduro.
Now, I know that some countries have a practical arrangement with Venezuela. Cuba has in the past sent effectively mercenaries, soldiers who would have no qualms about putting down Venezuelans, whereas a Venezuelan police officer might see a neighbor or a friend and actually flip sides. We've seen a senior Air Force general switch sides from Maduro to the people. So Cuba is like a special operatives force there. Iran has helped in other ways too. They've had cooperation for a decade. Does Turkey have anything to offer Venezuela other than moral and political and propaganda support? Is there any way that Turkey can actually boost the tyrant Maduro, or is it just symbolism?
You omitted to note that Russia has about $6 billion indebted to it, and China more like 60 billion.
Oh, so thank you for those reminders.
Large numbers, especially for a rather small country like Venezuela. No, there's not much, practically speaking, that's taking place between the Republic of Turkey and Venezuela. What is so interesting, I read an analysis that said that in Turkey, it's not just the government, but its arch foes, the leftist opposition, that has joined together in supporting Maduro against, effectively, the United States. And the reason they're doing this is because Turkey is going through economic travails, and there are elections coming up at the end of the next month. And so what the leadership is doing, both leftist and Islamist, is saying, look, we've got problems with the United States. That's why our economy is floundering. Venezuela has got even greater problems with the United States, and that's why its problems are even worse than ours. So it's a collusion. It's an electoral gambit. It is a very strange and dead-end kind of way of proceeding, but it makes sense logically within the Turkish domestic context.
You know, I follow John Bolton, who has had many roles in his life. He was a television pundit for many years. Of course, he's now doing national security with the Trump administration. He's active on Twitter, and he's got some interesting tweets in the last few days, speaking to the world's bankers, speaking to Maduro, saying, don't do business with Venezuela. You'll get in trouble with American sanctions. Don't help him. And he's had some funny tweets. I guess he's taking after his boss, saying to Maduro, you should go away, find a beach somewhere far away from Venezuela, and enjoy the rest of your life. So he's saying messages that obviously will be read by Maduro's people and passed on to him. I mean, it's a funny way of communicating in the year 2019.
It is.
But I think there really is a possibility. What do you think of this, Dr. Pipes? That maybe Maduro will scoop up a few $1 billion, and him and his family and his cronies and their families will get on a plane to Istanbul, which looks like a lovely city. I'd rather live in Istanbul than Tehran or probably even than Moscow. Do you think there's a chance that maybe Maduro could flee with his billions to Turkey and this thing would be ended that way?
He doesn't need to scoop them up. He's already got those billions. They're at his disposal. It's conceivable. It has happened in the past. There have been potentates who fled. Right now, there's in Saudi Arabia the former ruler of Tunisia, for example, or some decades past, Idi Amin, the ruler of Uganda, fled again to Saudi Arabia. It does happen. Estoril in Portugal is famous as the place where deposed kings and queens would live out their days. So it's possible. I think the key is the military and the police, the security forces, and whether they do flip or not. It looks like they are cracking at this point. But probably the next few weeks are critical.
Well, it's very interesting. And like I say, I was surprised to see a familiar face in Caracas. So we had Annika Rothstein agree to do some videos. And for those who want to see what it looks like, there's a terribly depressing video of ordinary Caracas citizens scrounging in a dumpster for food. They're so starving. They're so impoverished. I remember, Dr. Pipes, we had you on a couple months ago to talk about how Venezuela used to be the 4th richest country in the world measured by GDP. Even richer than Canada and the United Kingdom. I'll never get over that. Now they're literally eating out of dumpsters. The average Venezuelan has lost nearly 20 pounds because of malnutrition. It is truly shocking. It really is a man-made famine. It's horrific, I think.
Tyranny of bad ideas.
Yeah. Well, listen, Doctor, I want to switch gears. I appreciate you talking to us about Maduro and Turkey. That'll be interesting if anything comes from it. But I know that you're in Washington because tomorrow the Middle East Forum is hosting a conference on Qatar. Now, Qatar, as some people say, it is a tiny little country. It's not, I wouldn't even call it really a country. Most people who live there are not citizens. They're foreign indentured workers. They're oil rich. They're even more natural gas rich. They're strategically located. I know that Canada had some, and the United States had some military operations based there. But really, I know Qatar as two things. I know them as the sponsors of the poisonous propaganda channel called Al Jazeera, and I know them as the funder of ISIS. Tell me what your conference tomorrow will discuss about a regime I consider odious, or have I got it all wrong?
No, you have it. You have it right, as you usually do. I like to remember that in the mid-'90s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a joke going around in Washington political circles. What are the two great powers now? No longer the Soviet Union, United States, but now it's Qatar and the United States. So already, some 20 plus years ago, Qatar had these aspirations as symbolized by Al Jazeera. It's symbolized by the base, El Udeid, in Qatar, which has hosted some 10,000 Americans, not just a few. It's an enormous base. It's symbolized by its funding of all sorts of Islamist groups and so on. Our conference is focused primarily not on the Middle East and the Muslim world, but the West. What Qatari money has done here in the West. The law firms it's bought up, the donations to schools it's given. Let me take that for an example. They've encouraged the teaching and learning of Arabic, which is a good thing in itself, but they brought with it a lot of baggage about Islam, about Qatar, and it's dubious. It's worrisome. And so we'll be exploring the impact of Qatar. which, as you say, is tiny, 300 plus thousand Qatari subjects, Qatari nationals. Tiny, tiny, tiny. Could fit into, a part of Toronto, and no one would particularly. You could add it to Toronto, no one would hardly notice. But it's this tiny country with these extraordinary ambitions, due in part to the Wahhabi ideology and part to the personalities of the rulers, both the father and now the son.
Well, and obviously you can't do that without money, and the money comes from oil and gas. Obviously, it's a charter member of OPEC, and gas OPEC, which is a thing too. Qatar is one of the largest LNG, liquefied natural gas. Yeah. In fact, what's interesting, Dr. Pipes, I don't know if you know this, fracking is a debate in Canada, fracking for natural gas. And America is fracking like crazy, but in Canada it's a debate. And when there was a protest against fracking in a little tiny town called Rexton in New Brunswick, like this is a tiny town, I couldn't find it on a map, I'll be honest, I'd never heard of it before. Al Jazeera sent a team to cover this anti-fracking protest in Rexton, New Brunswick. Al Jazeera, because they want to suppress alternative sources of natural gas to themselves. So they have a hand in our anti-energy propaganda here in Canada. I don't know if you ever heard of that story, but the local rioters specifically mentioned Al Jazeera as their ally against the RCMP and against even Canadian media. Did you know? Have you ever heard of that before?
I had not, but let me give you a counter illustration. The New York Times has 43, I think, accredited journalists on Capitol Hill in Washington. Al Jazeera has 170 some.
Whoa, that's crazy.
So what
that's
are they
crazy. And it's just 300,000 nationals. Of course, they have a lot of foreign workers from India, from even Palestinians. I don't know if they're still welcome there. They have a lot of, people who are not even Muslim, who are not Arabian, just basically servants. It's basically a royal family, some other nationals, and a bunch of servants. That's how it seems to me. But you say they're just motivated by this global ambition. It's almost laughable, but I guess they're doing it, so it's not that laughable.
They are doing it, and it's not laughable, right? Well, they have extraordinary sums and ambition and imagination.
It's incredible. I mean, it's terrifying, but you've got to admire the sheer ambition of it. I saw recently Republican personalities, like people who I would follow on Twitter for a conservative voice, a Republican voice, that they are all gushing about Qatar, and they were all over there for some conference in Doha, which is really the only city there. And I thought, you too? They bought you too? So maybe you can just give us one example. And by the way, sorry, I don't think I mentioned this. On our website tomorrow, therebel.media, we will have a live stream of your conference. So you guys are having some TV cameras there. We're going to plug that right into the Rebel website. So whatever you guys broadcast, our viewers can watch it for free. They don't have to go to Washington. So hopefully people who are interested in this subject will tune in, at least for part of the day. I find it incredible that these Republicans are just being colonized or patronized, or I don't know what the word, they're being recruited, and they're presenting Doha and Qatar as if it's some great futuristic friend.
Let me go a step further. Not only conservatives in the United States, but pro-Israel conservatives and not conservatives. People like Alan Dershowitz, Morton Klein, Mike Huckabee have gone to Doha and in some cases received funding. For example, the Zionist Organization of America received $100,000 and came back glowing, saying wonderful things about it. And more importantly, their words were used by the Qatari lobbyists to hinder a bill in the House of Representatives that would have fingered Qatar as a supporter of terrorism because it supports Hamas. A bit complicated.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's right. Hamas leadership is in Qatar, right? And I think I heard that the 5 Taliban that were released to get Bo Bergdahl, the deserter, back, I think they're in Qatar now, too. Is that, right. I'm going from memory, so you correct me, Professor, if I'm wrong.
So far as I know, correct. So far as I know, correct.
So they're literally the home for the 5 Taliban terrorists, for the Hamas terrorists. Like we were talking earlier about hideouts for Maduro. Qatar is a hideout for Hamas and the Taliban, and they've supported ISIS. Like they're collecting all the bad guys. And you have even Jewish pro-Israel guys like Alan Dershowitz and Christian pro-Israel guys like Mike Huckabee saying these are the good guys. They must have a big budget.
They got a big budget. It's estimated they spent $1.5 billion to try to get dollars to get to the Trump administration. You see, there's this confrontation between Qatar on the one hand, Saudis, Emiratis, and others on the other hand. And in order to win the goodwill of the American administration, they spent $1.5 billion, which is not exactly chump change, but certainly affordable in the Qatari budget, and that's one of the topics we'll be looking at tomorrow.
Well, that's incredible. I won't keep you any longer, Dr. Pipes. I'm fascinated. I'm afraid I can't be there in person at the conference, although I appreciate the invitation that I received from the Middle East Forum. But I would say to all our viewers, if they are interested in going deep on this subject and hearing from trusted sources, that is you guys, to tune in tomorrow. That starts, I understand, at 9 a.m. Eastern time. And we will have the live stream as provided to us by you guys at the Middle East Forum. I just find this fascinating and terrifying. In my book, Groundswell, The Case for Fracking, I show how Iran, Russia, and Qatar are the big three when it comes to natural gas. And I don't know what God was thinking when he was handing out natural gas, but he gave it to all the world's bastards. What a shame. What a shame. And that just reminds me how important it is to be energy independent. I won't go on, Dr. Pipes, but this has been fascinating. I really appreciate your time today.
It's there in New Brunswick. You just got to pull it out.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks very much, and good luck at the conference tomorrow.
Goodbye.
All right, there you have it. Our friend Dr. Daniel Pipes of the Middle East Forum. He's in Washington for their conference tomorrow. Like I say, at 9 a.m. Eastern, you can follow that conference through a video feed that they will be connecting to our website. That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. Every day, I do a video monologue, and then I interview an interesting guest, and then I end by reading my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at therebel.media/shows.